maker, and psychologist today. During my days in Delhi, she was also my student in Jungian psychology. Though she had just returned from UK for this event, her responsibilities as a young mother has taken precedence today. Dr. Karan Singh has recorded his dreams for many years, first with his guru Ashish Da, who also used to be a Jungian interpreter, and later with me. Even after I left Delhi, he continued sharing his photocopies of his dreams from his diaries. They've greatly enriched my research, revealing archetypes from Indian mythology that I might never have encountered otherwise. As a Jungian study in Switzerland, we were rooted in European myths. Human behavior patterns are not created overnight. They crystallize over time through real and mythical personalities whose actions are embedded in the collective stories. The hero or the heroine's journey is one such structure defining right or wrong actions within a culture. A Jungian psychologist examines these dominant narratives and analyzes the relevance and function in contemporary life. Jungian psychology aims to guide individuals towards the word individuation, discovering their unique inner voice through their dreams. The ego mistakenly believes it has full control, but true individuation often feels like a rebellion against social norms. However, individuation is not about opposing collective. Rather, it's about fully realizing one's individuality within. And I want to quote here Jung himself. He says, every human face has a nose, two eyes, a mouth, etc. But these universal factors are variable, and it's this variability which makes individual peculiarities possible. Individuation is therefore a process of psychological development that fulfills the individual qualities given. In other words, it is a process by which man becomes the definite, unique being he in fact is. The American mythologist Joseph Campbell, in his seminal work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, mapped the hero's journey across cultures, showing where heroes succeeded or failed in their path to self-discovery. Viveka and I decided to use Campbell's framework as a backdrop for this film. She was in the UK, I was in Switzerland, and Dr. Karan Singh was in Delhi during the making of this. You will see Viveka explaining the key challenges a hero or heroine must face, followed by my conversation with Dr. Karan Singh, explaining whether he has found his own voice through his life. After the screening, if Dr. Karan Singh is willing, we may have the opportunity to hear from the hero himself. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Rashna Imhasly. I'm a psychotherapist and I live and work in India and Switzerland. I first met Dr. Karan Singh in 1980 when he was invited to speak at the Transpersonal Association Conference, ITA, in Bombay. I was a student of Jungian psychology then in Switzerland, and my spiritual teacher, Swami Muktananda, was invited to speak along with other teachers from India. I was curious about this strange mixture of psychology and spirituality and decided to attend the conference in India. At the end of the conference of ITA, Stan Groff, the president, invited participants to volunteer if they wanted to have it in the conference in their country. And I volunteered. And the next conference was held in Davos, 1983, in Switzerland, which I helped to organize. Dr. Karan Singh again was invited to speak there, and this time he was accompanied by his wife Asha. So I got to know them both at that conference. The following year, in 1984, my husband was posted to India as a Swiss diplomat at the embassy in New Delhi. And one of the first things which bonded us with the Singhs was a visit to their home, where my daughter Anisha was playing with the little Labrador puppy, and which she fell in love with. And the same evening, the puppy was sent with the driver as a gift to our daughter. We named him Raja, and he became the love of our life while we were in New Delhi. The transpersonal psychology was a novel approach to psychology, which was started in 1978 by Stanislav Grof, Michael Murphy, and Richard Price. It gave a spiritual context to psychology counseling methods and considered the Swiss psychologist C.G. Jung as one of the leading transpersonal psychologists. Dr. Karan Singh was also drawn towards this inner search for his inner self, what in Indian philosophy is known as the Atman. He started to take a deep interest in his unconscious, revealing through his dream world. And I assisted him in analyzing his dreams, and he seriously started to use this as an entry point into his life. Even when we moved away from Delhi, I used to get these thick envelopes with his dreams inside, which continues till today. Dr. Singh's granddaughter, Viveka, who's also a practicing psychologist today, is a filmmaker in her own right. She asked me if I would be the sutradhar for the film of her grandfather, to look at the psychological and spiritual growth as was the determined factor in his life. Viveka and I jointly came up with the idea of using Joseph Campbell's treatment of the mythological concept of the hero's journey. It's closely connected to the Jungian path of individuation. The treatment will be by way of questions to Dr. Karan Singh, and to put them in context, a short explanation and various stages of the hero's journey will be given, showing how they might run parallel to the various phases in Dr. Singh's own life.
So I will just begin with the introduction. In Jungian psychology, individuation is the core process that is studied, becoming truly oneself. In order to grasp this concept, the journey of hero and heroine in fairy tales and myths are studied so as to access universal human values. The process has to do with becoming a separate individual. The late mythologist Joseph Campbell called it the hero's journey. It makes clear the hero's goal to right a wrong, to achieve a dream, and confront the challenge that constricts their destiny and move in the direction they hope to choose, leading a life of their choice and not the one that is decided for them by their family.
This ties in what C.J. Jung explains about individuation, which is about coming to terms with the inner center of self, which inevitably starts with a wounding. Jung goes on to explain it starts with a conflict of conscience, which has no solution. It's a classical beginning of the process of individuation where man becomes the definite being, unique person he is meant to become. Dr. Karan Singh, coming to you as your journey, described by the late mythologist Joseph Campbell, he has to leave his collective destiny and his place of origin and journey on his own. He may need to go into exile to be able to function according to his own conscience. In your case, your destiny forced you to exile when you were in the United States on a prolonged medical treatment, and you were then just 18, I think, and the hospital in New York. You were there during the presidential elections. And how did that help you find your answers and the position when your future role confronted you when you came back to India?
Well, you mentioned Joseph Campbell. Let me tell you at the outset, I had the pleasure and privilege of meeting him. He came to Kashmir many years ago with Swami Nikhilananda from the Ramakrishna Mission in Los Angeles, I think. And they had lunch with me. So he was really a remarkable man, and his works, of course, iconic. Well, to answer your question, strangely enough, I was, as it were, ejected from my home and sent to America. You could call it an exile if you like, because my medical treatment was going nowhere. And I was, one day, Sardar Patel came into the house. He was visiting my father in Haridavas and my mother. And he saw me on the wheelchair. He said, "How long has this boy been on the wheelchair?" So uh, I said, "He's been there for 6 months and he's not got any better." So he said to my father, "Your Highness, send this boy to America immediately for treatment. Otherwise, he'll be on a wheelchair all his life." And that was how it was decided almost overnight to send me to America. So I went to America and I got into New York at midnight on the 31st of December 1947. Midnight. Then I spent the whole year there in bed. You know. So in a way, it was heavily disguised, of course, but it was a blessing because it got me out of the very turgid mm, atmosphere at that time in the court in my father's house. There was all this tension between him and Sheikh Abdullah. It was a very negative situation there. And there were killings going on all around, and the Pakistan invasion had started. So I got away from all of that. And I came into a totally new world. I was on a hospital bed. I was in that hospital for 10 and a half months in the same room. But it was a revelation, being in America and suddenly being in a new world, reading the American newspapers, which were huge, and I meeting a lot of people. So it was a very powerful experience. And you're quite right, it took me completely away from where I was. It was a comfort zone, if you like, completely away, and gave me the opportunity. I grew in that 1 year. I grew physically. I grew much bigger because I drank a lot of homogenized milk. But I also grew psychologically and mentally. And I think that that year in America, unexpected year, an unplanned year in America, you can call it perhaps an exile, but that did have a tremendous impact upon me for the rest of my life.
We were thrown out of your normal cultural milieu. So
Yes,
that's why I call it an exile.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, of course. I had, mind you, two people were with me from state. My father had sent two army officers with me, but it was obviously totally different.
Yeah.
The people were different. The whole thinking was different. It was more open, It was something that I really lapped up, I think. And then after I got out of hospital, I was in America still for about a month and a half. And that was when I saw plays and traveled in America and saw Niagara Falls and went around. It was very, that was a very nice period.
Mm.
It did help me in my future career. It made me, I think, made me more self-reliant
Mhm.
than I would have been otherwise.
Okay.
It gave me a sort of, as it were, an inner muscle, if you like.
Okay.
Dragon. Parents represent the archetype of threshold guardians. They are often unable to accommodate and adjust to the fast changing realities of today's world. It is important to recognize this archetype because it is often the people who love us and want the best for us, but in reality do not want us to change as it threatens them. We must understand that it is their function to test if we are ready to take the change on.
How did that help you, whether to join the new government that was being formed in the independent India when you were back? When did you feel you had to break away from your collective parental conditioning and follow what you felt was your own path? Campbell warns, Joseph Campbell in his hero's journey says, to begin a journey seems like a treacherous path as the hero feels he has to embark on his journey all on his own, but he adds that the gods are with him. What was the dilemma you faced at that time when you got back and you were faced with this?
See, Rashna, first of all, let's understand joining the central government came 20 years later. The dilemma that I faced when I got back was whether I should join the new structure that was being set up for Jammu and Kashmir. I'm still in Jammu and Kashmir, not in the government of India yet. That comes later on, and many of your questions. But this
Yeah.
particular question, as soon as I got back, soon thereafter, my father was asked to leave the state. Siddharth Patel again. My father and mother both were asked to leave the state, thanks to the pressure of Sheikh Abdullah.
Mhm,
It's a long story, I won't go into that. And I was left entirely on my own.
mhm.
I was appointed regent, first of all, by my father. And then a couple of years later, what Sheikh Abdullah did was he made a big song and dance about abolishing the monarchy
Mhm.
because he'd always been against our family. He was intensely anti-Dogra. And then, after abolishing the monarchy, there was a post created in the J&K constitution of the Sadr Riyasat Head of State. So
Mm.
dilemma was whether I should join that, accept that post or not.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
naturally, my father and many of the Dogras said that, look, he's insulted your father, he's abolished the monarchy. How can you now go and become his stooge and go and sit there as Sadr? So that was
How
a
was
very
that for you? How was
very
that for you?
that was very painful because by accepting the post, that was where the two roads diverged.
Mhm.
Had I not accepted the post, I would have had to leave the state and spend the rest of my life in your hometown of Bombay racing. But I decided no. I decided I wanted to be part of the emerging new India because we'd read about it in Jawaharlal Nehru's books, The Discovery of India, and the autobiography and so on. So I accepted. That was the painful thing. When I accepted, I paid the price for it.
Of course.
Literally, psychologically, I was all right, but physically, I paid the price for it because I didn't get any of his wealth or his jewelry and all. He sort of, as it were, cut me out of his will, in as far as those were concerned. But um, I did take that, and there was a lot of reaction in Jammu. I remember when I came back. As you know, we are Jammu and Srinagar. It's a
Yeah.
bifocal state. All of this happened in Srinagar. When I went to Jammu first as Riyasat, there was a sea of black flags all the way from the airport to the palaces. That was really terrible, because they were so angry.
Yeah.
Their anger abated later, I'll tell you, when you come to the thing. But at that particular juncture, they were all very angry. My father was very angry. And I was there all alone, except for my mentor, whom we will come with later. So that
But
was killing the
that's
parental.
exactly what Campbell says, that when you journey on your own, You
Oh,
feel you're alone, but the gods are with you.
also certainly with, and the goddess too.
Yes. Your mother was also a very influential female figure in your life while you were growing up. You've spoken about the strong bonds that you had when you were growing up. What role did she play in your early life? And were you able to face these new challenges at that young age when you were in opposition to your father? How was it for the mother being involved in this?
You see, it was very complicated because my father and mother had also by that time separated.
Okay.
So there were different tensions. There was a tension between me and my father because of his political judgment. There was
Mhm.
a tension between my father and my mother. And my father always felt that I favored her rather than him. So that was an additional tension. And she also was forced to leave the state. She wasn't with me. And perhaps it was just as well because then I was on my own.
Mm.
And she went to a different place. He went to a different place. But to talk of her role in childhood, before all of this happened, when I was growing up, when I was up to the age of 15 or 14 or 15, she played a very major role because she was she was she was the one I loved most, quite clearly, and uh, it was always a pleasure. And she used to sing songs on the dholki, you know. But she was a village girl. She was not a princess. She was a
Okay.
village girl. Yes.
Okay.
My father married four times. The first three were princesses,
Mhm.
but fourth time she was from a village. And therefore she tried to bring the sort of village into the palace as it were, with the women playing dholkis and doing dancing during festivals and going around to Lodi pujas and so on. So that was very important for me. She was religious in the normal sense of the term, you know, not philosophical, but she was religious like any Hindu ladies are. And that had an impact on me. And she taught me a lot of very useful things, always to be considerate towards whoever I spoke with, to be considerate towards servants.
The next step is the fear that the hero must face. Refusing the call is the fear of the unknown. Also, the fear of committing an offense to the natural order of things as they existed in Kashmir, where you were the son of the ruling order. The hero often expresses his reluctance to get involved.
You must
Mm.
have faced that in your journey to be caught in the turmoil, between what was happening with your parents, what was your prompting from your inner voice. After being exposed to this democratic worldview in America and you came back, how were you able to um,
You see,
come
Rashna,
back
I
to
think that
Kashmir and face this situation?
mhm, I had realized even in the last years of school, I was at home school,
Yeah.
I had realized after reading some important books, particularly The Discovery of India by Jawaharlal Nehru and his autobiography, that the feudal order was on its last legs. I knew that it was not going to subsist for very long. And I was quite prepared to play my role in the new India. It was not at that time a wrench. In fact, that was something I had expected. And I was looking forward, in fact. I was a young, idealistic man at that time. I was 18, 19, 20. I wanted, and this India had emerged after centuries of servitude. So I wanted to be part of the new India. I didn't want to just sit on the sidelines as some kind of a feudal entity. I wanted to be part of this new India. And therefore, I think that sojourn in America also helped me to accept the democratic system very openly and very happily, in fact.
So, the relationship with a mentor is a common theme on the hero's journey. It stands for a bond between teacher and student or a god man which he looks up to. The function of the mentor is to prepare the hero for the unknown, giving the guidance and an inner force that prepares him to act. A mentor also awakens the inner conscience of the hero, giving him courage for renewal in his life to face the further adventures on his own, luring him out of the collective conditioning of his cultural constraints that are the cause of his inner turmoil.
Who was this person in your life who changed this and helped you, being the mentor, helping you out of your inner turmoil, and the person who you chose to help you cross this difficult situation which you were faced with?
It's quite clearly it was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, because he was in a way my hero. He was the hero of most young Indians at that time. He was a young, charismatic leader of the freedom movement. And he personally took a liking to me and was very, very supportive. In fact, without his mentorship, I would not have been able to make the transition into democracy. So he was there supporting all the time. It's interesting in a way, both were father figures, who both were almost the same age. My father, who represented quintessentially the old feudal order, and Jawaharlal Nehru, who represented the new democracy. And I was, as I told you, between the two, and I clearly opted for Jawaharlal Nehru. So he was my mentor throughout. In fact, there's a whole book of my correspondence with Jawaharlal Nehru published. And he always called me my dear tiger. All his letters are my dear tiger. You know, my pet name is Tiger. Daddy used to call me Tiger. So every one of Panditji's letters are my dear tiger. And there's a whole book of them. He was constantly writing to me. And when I came to Delhi, I'd meet him, I'd have breakfast with him, which was a great privilege at that time.
How difficult was it for you to go through this individuation process where you had to actually choose between your father and your mentor? This must have been quite a heavy burden because it's not just about killing the parental dragon, but it was also the whole civilization transition from the old feudal way and the democratic way which your mentor Nehru entrusted in you.
It was difficult. It was difficult, but I think the fact that I went to a public school, Doon School, now it's looked upon as elitist, but at that time it was a progressive measure because most princes were sent to the princely schools, the Mayo College and the Rajkumar College and so on. And that had smoothened out a lot of my edges. And so I think I was quite prepared by that time to be ready. And I was in fact excited to become part of this. Part of the reason why I accepted Jawaharlal Nehru was there was an excitement. Here now at last, I've broken free from the shackles of the past and I'm setting out on my own. So I think that is the answer to your question.
Okay. Another very difficult stage on your journey must have been when you were part of the Congress party and the emergency came with Indira and you were part of the Congress and you decided to stand up against it. Uh, it's again challenging the old world order and coming up with your own. She was another threshold guardian in your life that you had to cross.
She was. She was a threshold guardian. But let's be clear. I'm sorry. It's not correct that I stood up to her in the emergency. I remained with her during the emergency. All that I did do was that uh, before the emergency, there was, if you remember that the series of events, there was a High Court judgment unseating her, which really sparked off the whole disaster. And at that time, I did write to her to suggest that she should resign. As, that would give her
You were
more.
against it. Basically, you were against it.
Yeah, so then the emergency came later, but I was with her all the 10 years during the emergency. The 10 years of Indira Gandhi were very interesting. There was the high point was the liberation of Bangladesh. Don't forget that. I was in her cabinet all the time during the Bangladesh war. In fact, I was the aviation minister when our plane was hijacked that really began the whole series of events. So I was very much with her, supporting her for this great adventure of carving out a new country. Because it was a famous victory, as they say, of the Bangladesh war under Sam Manekshaw, who was then the army chief. But then, so there was the high point of Bangladesh, and there was a low point of the emergency. I was with her throughout Bangladesh and throughout the emergency. So I saw both sides of the picture. But it's not correct that I stood up against it during the emergency. I didn't, but I did, I think I was the only one who wrote to her to say, please resign before the emergency was announced.
Did you regret it at any point?
Regret not having been, not regret
No,
what?
opposing her during the emergency.
No, I didn't oppose her during the emergency.
No, but not opposing.
Not leaving her.
Not opposing her, yes. Well, it was again a very difficult decision. Very difficult decision. There again, I was torn between two. My democratic instincts and my liberal philosophy urged me to break with her. On the other hand, Jawaharlal Nehru had been my mentor for so many years. She had been like an elder sister because whenever she had a party, she'd call and said, can you and Asha come to dinner? Jacqueline Kennedy is coming. So, we were on that sort of terms. She came to Kashmir. She stayed in our little annex once with Sanjay and Rajiv. So, I had a very good, very strong personal relationship with her. And her father was my mentor. So I didn't feel that I could leave her at that particular time.
Yeah.
We didn't know how the emergency was going to develop.
Yeah.
But no, it was an important decision. But ultimately I took that decision.
The queen in myths symbolizes the feminine principle within man. She represents the principle of relatedness, his anima, which is the level of the soul. She holds the golden thread, symbolizing the thread of connectedness to the man's feelings, where he is in touch with his innermost feelings and no longer dependent on others and keeping his heart open. The queen functions as his channel between the archetype that is alive and his inner voice of the self.
So you were married so early at a very young age. And tell us a little bit about the role that Asha played in your life. And
yes, please go ahead.
Very important role.
Yes. It's the most extraordinary relationship. We were married when I was 19 and Asha was 13.
Oh my God.
And she came from a big family with lots of uncles and aunts and all. And she suddenly got married to this young man all alone. When we came back, there was nobody there. My mother wasn't there, father wasn't there, no sisters. I'm an only one and only. No brothers, no sisters, no aunts, no uncle. Nobody was there. It was just the two of us. So it was quite extraordinary how we grew up together at that time. It was almost, we started studying together. How she grew, it is remarkable. Because when she came from Nepal, she came from a very sequestered background. And for her to be able to adjust, she was the one really who made the heroine's journey. When you come to think of it, for her to suddenly be thrown into this entirely new atmosphere and different people. She didn't know the language. She didn't speak Hindi very well. She spoke some English, but she didn't know Dogri. But the way she adjusted and the way over the years she picked up the language and she started coming out. She used to sit quietly. Whenever we had parties, she just listened. She was a good listener. So she just learned a lot. And our relationship was a very extraordinary relationship. But, you must give us credit for one thing that when Jyoti was born, she was already 20. So we had, we didn't have a baby when she was 14 or 15.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, those 5 or 7 years before Jyoti was born, must have been very difficult for her. But she picked up, we had English tutors for her. We had a Miss Mallinson, if you remember. She runs at Mallinson School in Srinagar. We had a Mrs. Henley, Asha Henley. And they taught her English. She used to come every day. And she learned painting. She learned to play the sitar and so on. So she was also learning along with me. And I found as we went, as she grew up, that she was a tremendous asset. For one thing, she was very beautiful. And the second thing is she was very shrewd. Her judgment was much better than mine, frankly. And for example, she'll say that fellow's a crook. And I say, no, just a thing. And sure enough, 5 years later, he turned out to be a crook. So she was a better judge
But
of
she
character.
was a channel to your inner conscience in
She
many
was
ways.
definitely, and she was a great strength. I got into the um, election mode in 1967. I started, traveling a lot before that. Even when we were very young, when she was about, let's say about 18, 19, we started traveling. And whenever there was an election, my first election was in 1967. And
Mhm.
she was exactly 30. And she was such an asset because wherever we went, the women would come down to see. We want to see our Yuvrani. We want to, normally the women in conservative cultures don't come out very much.
Mm.
It was even true in Jammu. But nonetheless, they would all come to see her. And while I was making my speech, she would sit with them. She was a great asset. So the 4 elections that I fought and won, I think was largely due to her. So I must say, she must have had a very difficult time. Looking back, she must have had a very difficult time adjusting to the new situation and adjusting to me. I don't think I was the easiest person to get married. I don't know. That's for her to judge. But then when we came to Delhi, of course, she was, she was my father. I mean, she was a cabinet minister's wife. I was 36, she was 30, and all the parties. And I was in tourism and civil aviation. So those were just the areas where we were fated and we were partied everywhere in India. Wherever we went abroad, there were these parties thrown for us and all. So that was something where she found her métier, as it were. So she was a great asset, and she passed away, as you know, in the 60th year of our marriage, just before our 60th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to her for her support all my life.
Um, I would like you to talk about how it was for you to be, as a young uh, Sadr-e Riyasat of Kashmir at such a young age.
Yes. Well, the Sadr Riyasat meant it was governor, I was head of the state. So it was a responsibility. I became Sadr Riyasat uh, just at the age of 21. In fact, they waited until I was 21 before they passed the law. And everywhere else in the constitution, the minimum age for a governor was 35. But
Oh,
in our constitution, the minimum age was 21 because, this is one of those weird situations where I don't think anybody as young as me, I mean, many princes and kings in Europe became rulers. I know some dear friends of mine, Baudouin, the king of Belgium, or Juan Carlos, the king of Spain. They were my age, and their fathers were also pushed out. They also became heads of state at a very young stage. But for me, to be Sadr Riyasat it was an honor in a way, it was a privilege, and it was a responsibility. I was also chancellor of the university. So that gave me opportunity to interact with university people. But I was studying all the time, Rashna. I did my graduation from the university of which I was the chancellor. It's probably never happened in the world before. Then I went on to do my MA, PhD in Delhi universities. All the time that I was there as Sadr Riyasat, I was studying, studying, studying.
yeah, you also insisted on calling yourself then Dr. Karan
Yes,
Singh and
when my father passed away, I was known as Yuvraj Karan Singh.
yeah,
Yuvraj means crown prince.
yes.
When my father passed away in 1961, I made a statement to say, although I was recognized as Maharaja,
Yeah.
I made a statement to say that I would not use my official title as Maharaja because I was still Sadr Riyasat, and there would have been a conflict between being a Maharaja and a Sadr Riyasat.
Yeah.
So I made a mistake. That's how it all came about. And then Sadr Riyasat, the post itself morphed into governor. Then I became the governor. So I was head of state in 3 incarnations, Rashna. A regent for 3 years,
Mhm.
the age of 18 to 21. Sadr Riyasat for 14 years, and then governor for 3 years. So I did the whole 18 years. That's how it felt.
The archetype of mature masculine operates from his conscience, which is connected to the inner self. Psychologically, he is secure in himself and therefore honors others to be themselves. He holds his personal sense of boundaries without hostility. Yet, when an unjust response is called for, he is able to act out of his inner conscience and responds appropriately to the situation in an attempt to contribute something of value to society. As a ruler, he is against racism, regionalism, classism, nationalism, and poverty, as it affects the general well being of the people at large. He is able to address the deeper realities of life, taking into account both sides and finding his own sense of integrity, as he has a sense of loyalty to himself, his family, friends, community, and ultimately to the nation at large.
So, being the mature masculine as you are at your age now, Dr. Karan Singh, I would really like to know, after having been Sadr Riyasat and having been in the Congress party for so long and served at several posts and so on, how is it for you after you have now stepped down as a member of parliament to have seen the situation which has developed in Kashmir now? What is it that your inner conscience has
Yes.
is what is
What
your
after
viewpoint?
after Sadr Riyasat, I did 10 years as cabinet minister. That I think was a very important
Yeah.
period of my life. And then I was ambassador to the United States. Don't forget that. So I had all sorts of, by then, I was chairman of the Indian Council of Cultural Relations. I
Yeah.
was India's nominee on the executive board of UNESCO for 8 years. So I did a lot of things, other things apart from politics, a lot of cultural things that had also helped me to mature and to, as it were, transcend the politics. Because although was in parliament for 40 years, I wasn't a quintessential politician. I was doing a lot of other things apart from politics. There's some people, and I'm not being judgmental, there's some people whose whole life revolves around politics. They live politics, they eat politics. I was not like that. Politics was there. It was only one part of my life. I had a lot of other things to do. So the question that you ask is, how do I now feel? When I stepped down, it was in a way a relief. I stepped down after 40 years. I made a speech. I said that I entered Parliament 40 years ago as an idealistic young man, and I'm leaving 40 years later as an idealistic old man because I'm still idealistic about India. I feel that our civilizational values are not in conflict with our constitutional values.
Mhm.
The values of the Upanishads, for example, the values of oneness, of fraternity, uh, of inclusion are really part of our culture. So this is a point that I make all the time: constitutional values and civilizational values. I do not find them in conflict with each other. And looking back, I've seen a lot of things. Now, you asked a specific question about what happened in Jammu and Kashmir last year. Well, let me say, I had mixed emotions. First of all, the state that my ancestors created, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the largest princely state in India, 84,000 square miles. We already lost half of it in 1947.
Yeah.
Because in 1947, by the time there was a ceasefire, a large portion of the state, Gilgit-Baltistan, huge areas, and the western strip of Mirpur, Muzaffarabad, the POK as we call it, or Azad Kashmir as they call it, we'd lost that. About 50% of the state we'd lost. What happened was that the rest of the state was also then, as it were, broken because it became a union territory. Ladakh became separate union territory, which is not a bad thing. We were left only with Jammu and Kashmir. And we were also demoted to the status of a union territory. That I thought was not fair. I didn't see any reason why when Jammu and Kashmir was still there, why we should have been demoted to a union territory, as it were. And also, it was painful that so many people had to be locked up for so long. You know, Farooq Abdullah, I've known, he's a little younger than me, but we are very good friends. and Mehbooba I didn't know so well, but the fact that these people had to be locked up for over a year, that was painful. It was a painful event. But the other part of it was that mm, it was, in some ways, it was inevitable. It was an inevitable movement because ultimately this whole state no longer had any real, what should I say, real credibility left. Remember one thing, Rashna, Jammu and Kashmir was like Yugoslavia, exactly almost. 5 different regions. Baltistan, Ladakh, Kashmir Valley, Jammu, and this Punjabi Muslim belt. So we were never a homogeneous state. It was built up by my ancestors, by conquest. So it had to go in. It was the last empire. I wrote in an article, all empires must come to an end. Ours has also come to an end today. So to that extent, in a way, you could call it an inevitable thing, but it was painful. It was painful.
So you said you had many hats during your time.
Yeah.
One was also your inner world with the dreams that
Yes, yes.
you've been a Shiva Bhakt for a large part of your life and on the spiritual journey also for most of your life. I know that because for many years you've been analyzing your inner life through your dreams. And you had this very big dream in 1990 about Kali. And can you just tell us about that dream and what the gulab jamun meant that you were offering?
It was an extraordinary dream, a very vivid dream which you remember all your life. I've only had 2 or 3 dreams like that I remember so clearly. I was in some kind of a temple compound, and there was a rumor that a gigantic figure was moving somewhere in the area, and everybody was afraid. Some giant was moving in the area, and I look up and I see the huge figure of Mahakali with the 4 arms, and the moment she sees me, she immediately comes down to human size, although she still has her 4 arms, and she walks through the temple gate towards me. And as she comes towards me, I have a gulab jamun, which I put into her hand. Now, gulab jamun is so clear. My ancestor who founded the state was Maharaja Gulab Singh. And the name Jammu comes from Jamun, Jambu Lochan, Jamun eyed. So it was Jammu and Kashmir quite clearly. So I gave that into her hand. I must tell me she hasn't given it back to me, and she dealt with it after that. So in some ways, of course, the changes were to come much later, but perhaps in some ways it meant that I was just not able to cope with the Jammu Kashmir situation and I had to give it into the higher power. And your interpretation of this was that the moment the divine recognizes you, it, it loses its fear and comes down to human form. But she still has her power. She still has her 4 arms. So the fact that she came towards you and you give Gulab Jamun was in a way a blessing, in a way a challenge, and it was something I can still remember that dream. That is how it happened. And, we discussed it with Madame Louise von France. You remember when you were with me in Zurich, was it, or Geneva? Zurich.
That's why we remember the dream so well.
And we went, and there was the Little King and lots of other dreams. And you yourself helped me a lot with your dream interpretations.
But it has been a privilege for me to accompany you because I learned so much about Indian mythology through all your dreams because very often I had looked them up. I didn't even know the archetype. So it's been a privilege for me too to accompany you.
Well, let me thank you for your support because I found that your interpretations are very insightful, and I've had the most extraordinary dreams, as you know. I've had animal dreams, all sorts of animals, a lion, a tiger, a panther, a dog, a cat, a giraffe, a rhinoceros. I mean, you name it. Lots of animal dreams for some strange reason. And also dreams where I'm swimming, and dreams of Asha, and lots of different dreams and so on. And you've been able always to put your finger, as it were, on the major point that was being made through those dreams. And that continues down to the present day. My last batch is waiting for you if you ever get my letters in your former address. So thank you very much, Rashna, for your support. I've enjoyed working with you.
Well,
And
it's a privilege
let's hope it goes on to the future.
on your inner journey. Thank
And
you.
thank you, Viveka, for what you're doing.
Thank
And
you.
good
No,
luck.
this is a great privilege for me to hear both of you with your work together as well, and just how you've supported each other so
And it's
beautifully.
extraordinary that we're doing this from 3 different countries,
Yes,
Yes.
from London, from Geneva, and from Delhi. It's
Ji.
amazing what technology can do.
Just any last thoughts that either of you want to share about the
I would
journey?
just
Any?
also say that one last thing that has touched me very much is also to see after all these years through your dreams, Dr. Karan Singh, that you've been able to make peace with your father through your dreams.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that.
Um,
So many dreams of my father.
yeah.
I've had.
So you've
And
really sort of
I
closed.
made up. I made up with him
Yeah,
in my
you.
psychologically, because the dreams have come all the time. My mother never appears, and Rashna says it's because I had no problem with her. So she never appears in my dream. She was so close to me in real life, much closer than my father, but she never appears in my dreams. Whereas my father, with whom I had, appears all the time. All the time he appears. And sometimes I'm touching his feet. Sometimes the latest was he was coming to get married, and I receive him and open the, you haven't seen that dream yet. Open the door of his car. And he's coming to get married. Although there was no bride and there was no baja and no nothing. But he was coming to get married. I opened the car, the
Wow.
door. Another opening of the door to him. So that is true. I definitely have made up with my father in my dreams. That is, as you said, I think that's a good thing, because why should one go with some negativity?
Come full circle with him, and I think that's wonderful.
And
Thank you.
one last thing is, what is the first memory of both of you meeting? That would be nice. A context of from both your perspectives of when you both met and first decided that okay, we can work with each other with dreams and other things.
We met in
My,
Bombay, didn't we?
my Jungian, well, from my side,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because he was working already with Marie-Louise Fonfrance and Theo. And then after 1980, 1992, when when Dr. Karan Singh was the head of ICCR, he said we must see what happened at the collective unconscious, and we must have a conference here, and invited the Jung Institute to come here. And then I was given the role of doing the Ramayana myth,
Right.
which I sent to Dr. Fonfrance, and she said that it's a very dysfunctional myth, the way it's interpreted, uh, and you must analyze it because woman has no place in this myth. And I think the wonderful thing was that Dr. Karan Singh invited the Jung Institute, and we had the conference in 4 different places: Hyderabad, Calcutta, Bombay, and Delhi.
Mm.
It was thanks to him being the head of ICCR.
Yeah, I think so. And we also, later, I was working with Stan Groff, as you know, Stan and Christina Groff. And we attended many of his transpersonal psychology conferences, the one in Bombay, for example.
Mhm.
I think
It was very first.
yes, I think we first met at the ITA, International Transpersonal Association conference in Mumbai, which must have
And then
been
in Davos, that was in 1980. And
19.
then in 82, both you and Asha came to the Davos conference.
Was, yes. And it was a lovely conference, I remember there. Then we kept meeting. So Stan Groff, who was the greatest living authority on LSD therapy and a very good friend, whole group, and he was the one who started the Transpersonal Association movement, really. He was very important. He's still alive. Uh, I just got a message from him a couple of days ago. So
He's
that was
my
another powerful.
Sandroff is my mentor.
Is he? He's your mentor. Okay. Very fine man. A very fine man. Stands to you, but Jawaharlal Nehru was to me.
Yes, that's right. I wouldn't have been where I am because at the conference in ITA conference, he said the next conference I had to speak, and I was absolutely in my depths to be able to speak at such a big conference. But that's how my life started. And then at the Joseph Campbell centenary conference, I spoke about the mythology East and West. I did um, the comparative mythology uh, section for that conference, which was a great honor for me.
We've really kept in touch ever since I have not been to your Kiki Manzil, but you've been to my house in Delhi many times.
Yes.
And it's always very nice. And I treasure this friendship and value it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Okay, okay. Bye bye.
I'll just
If anybody wants to ask some questions to Dr. Karan Singh, he'll be sitting here for a few minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
Quick question. Could you tell the audience about your Gandhi dream?
Not sure whether I had a Gandhi dream, but I met Gandhiji. Yes, yes, oh, of course. I had a very vivid dream. When I went to for the first time, I was invited to the governor's conference in Delhi. Every year there was a governor's conference. And I was invited for the first time as Sadr Riyasat. So I was put into the Dwarka suite, which is the sort of best suite that they have for heads of state and all. And that night I had a dream. I had a dream that I was standing in the middle of the room. The door opened on the right, and Gandhiji walked in, dressed in spotless white. Otherwise, when I met him, he was not in spotless white. He was very old, but he walked in. He put his left hand on my shoulder, took my right hand in his hand, and said, "You will be a very wise man." I was 22. Whether I fulfilled his professed prophecy or not, I leave it to you to judge.
But do you know what that means?
he appeared as your inner Atma in your dream. Do you realize that?
It was quite extraordinary that I should suddenly see him there. My first night at Rashtrapati Bhavan. And very clear, heart I said, Pagana, you will be a very wise man. Yes. वो दवाई है जरा.
So, is this better?
Yes,
Yeah.
it has to be better.
All right. So I want to thank you both, Rashna and you, for a very imaginative and deep presentation of your life, which is an extraordinary life. My question is that about dreams, and then I have a couple of comments. My question about the dream is everyone dreams. It's a universal phenomenon, right? And I study the neurobiology of dreams. My question is not every one of us has a gulab jamun ready to offer the goddess. So we have to understand what to give out of our ordinary lives to the goddess. So, do you have any wisdom? Because we know that dreaming is universal on this point.
It will depend really on each individual. I don't think we can generalize. Every individual has something that they can offer.
But it's
Something
hard.
precious.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Mm.
मेरी मशीन चल रही है अभी गुलमर्ग पहुंच गए हम बैठे बैठे तो आप लोगों को ठंड नहीं लग रही है क्या तो ये कोई कट नहीं कर सकते देखो बोलो हाँ
So,
हाँ sorry what are your comments quick please
So, my comments are two. One, I noticed that one of your books was called An Examined Life, which is from Socrates, you know.
yes.
And he says, an unexamined life
Not
is.
worth living.
Do you agree?
Yes.
And so you do. And so what is the process of examining a life? And the other comment that I had was that the dream has been the subject of speculation and mythology for a long time. Today, our dreams are in a collective, political dreams and other dreams seem to involve the lack of heroism. You know, heroes are hard to come by today. So, how would you think of the role of the hero in a world, you know, the old order changeth and all that?
Yes,
But
well-
how do you think of the role of a hero in a time of great turmoil and
It is a
different
time of
kind
turmoil and of
Yes,
change, there's no
yes.
doubt about it.
Yeah, so
But who is the hero in India
Who
today?
is the hero
You can all
in India
decide for
today?
yourselves.
yes, in India today or anywhere.
The lady behind 1, 2, 3. So, beta, you want?
So, having
Could you put it off again? Off, please.
worn so many hats through your life and this phenomenal journey, what really do you think is the nature of your life?
Well, that is
Where?
an interesting question.
Yeah.
Towards my life, I think the first thing is to develop an inner center, a spiritual center within, which should be strong enough to, you see, once you have a center, then you can have as many concentric circles as you like. It doesn't really matter. But if your center shifts, then you become eccentric, then you become paranoid, then you become, So I think the real nature is to develop within. For me, for example, my religion has helped a lot. शिव जी की भक्ति या माता की भक्ति करता हूँ. That has given me that inner center around which all the caps that I've worn effortlessly.
I would like to add to that. Most of the dreams that Dr. Karan Singh has had, Jung talks about the wise man within or the Atma within. He always has that aspect somehow within the dream. And it comes out in different forms at different times.
And Jung used to say that it's very, very important to look at the dream to see what that personality is saying to us, because it's a part of our unconscious that's talking to us. He had a dream which was called Philemon. It was a wise being, and he used to talk to Philemon up and down the river on the lake of Zurich. And many years later, an Indian man who knew Gandhiji came to visit him. And he said, "Do you have a guru or do you have somebody?" He said, "Yes, I have Shankaracharya." So Jung said, "Do you mean Shankaracharya from the Vedas?" He said, "Yes." But he said, "He's dead and gone." He said, "Yes, but he comes to me in my dreams and I talk to him." And he realized Philemon was the same thing for him. And in that way, most of his dreams have that kind of figure which we have to sort out. And then he converses with that part of himself. It's usually there in his dreams. I think it's because he's had that close connection to spirituality, and Aurobindo was a great hero for him also.
Sorry. Having known you for quite long time, maybe 30 years, and seeing your personality, your spiritualism, your uprightness, your philosophical thought, and your being involved in politics, which I find a contradiction in terms of piety, in terms of honesty, in terms of philosophy, in terms of spiritualism, all that thing. How do you reconcile this with the so-called, quote unquote, the treachery of political game planning? And how did you cope up with this kind of situation?
Yes. Well, I think the answer lies that if you are clear as to what you believe and the way you behave, then you need not be carried away by what is happening around you. And for example, in the Raj Sabha, when there used to be such a big crowd and show, I had my mala with me. तो मैं टेबल के नीचे माला जपता रहता था नहीं बता बोलते रहो चिल्लाते रहो मैं नमः शिवाय बोलता रहूंगा सो आई नो व्हाट आई वाज गोइंग टू डू आई वाज क्वाइट क्लियर मैंने कहा आप चाहे जितना मर्जी शोर गुल मचाएं मैं उसका हिस्सा नहीं होने वाला तो मैं और डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह हम ही दो बैठते थे बाकी सब भागते थे चलो जी चलो कि जैसे फुटबॉल मैच हुआ तो वो सब बदतमीजियां जो होती हैं that is something which is, I agree, very unfortunate. But that doesn't mean that we should either be afraid of them or that we should follow them.
मैं काशी का हूँ अशोक सिंह जहाँ पे आप वाइस चांसलर थे वहीं का मैं विद्यार्थी हूँ बस ये एक दिमाग में एक चीज आई कि रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर जिन्होंने गांधी को मोहनदास जी को महात्मा कहा कि महात्मा हैं देश के उसी महात्मा ने आपको बुद्धिमान कहा महात्मा गांधी ने बुद्धिमान कहा आपको महात्मा गांधी ने आपको बुद्धिमान कहा ना
वो बुद्धिमान कहा था कि हाँ तुम
बुद्धिमान होंगे
तो होंगे
रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने गांधी को महात्मा कहा और महात्मा ने आपको बुद्धिमान कहा मैं ये कह रहा हूँ तो उन्होंने देश में रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने गांधी को चुना महात्मा बनाया और महात्मा ने आपको बुद्धिमान कहा अब आप देश में ही बताइए किसको क्या कहने वाले हैं
मैं नहीं कहूँगा कि
देखिए देश की निगाहें आपके ऊपर हैं देखिए जहाँ मैं व्यक्तिगत मैं बहुत दिनों से आपके संपर्क में हूँ और जानता हूँ कि आपके दिमाग में मन में विश्वसनीयता है पवित्रता है सब कुछ है कहीं किसी के लिए कोई दुष्विचार नहीं है गलत भावना नहीं है इसलिए मैं आपसे निष्पक्ष पूछना चाहता हूं कि आप देश में रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने गांधी को महात्मा कहा महात्मा ने आपको बुद्धिमान कहा आप किसी के बारे में कुछ राय रखते हैं कहना चाहते हैं
इनके बारे में
किसी के बारे में इनके बारे में नहीं देश में जो लोग हैं अभी
जो लोग अभी
राष्ट्र में अभी जो जिंदा हैं अभी मर के उनके लिए नहीं जो जिंदा हैं
हाँ, अलग अलग
आप
लोग
किसी को
हैं।
चुन पाएंगे?
एक मिनट मैडम एक मिनट, मैं नहीं कहूंगा आप गौतम बुद्ध के लिए कुछ कहें, मैं नहीं कहूंगा गांधी के लिए कुछ कहें, जो हैं अभी सामने दिख रहे हैं उनके बारे में, किसी के बारे में आपको एक शब्द कहना चाहेंगे?
ना ही करूँ तो अच्छा है।
इसका मतलब ये मन लगा, इसका मतलब ये हम लोग लगाएंगे कि इस लायक कोई बचा ही नहीं कि इसके बारे में आप कुछ बोल दे सकते। थैंक यू।
Yes,
वही मैं पूछ रही थी कि आप किसी को चुन पाएंगे? आप किसी को चुन पाएंगे कि उसे कुछ कहें?
वैसे तो बहुत
अपनी
सारे
विरासत।
लोग बच्चे हैं हमारे, वो सब वो है, they are one son is here, I have the daughter is not here, unfortunately she is in Jammu. The other son is not here. You want to say something? You've known me for years. Somebody behind you.
Gloria, yeah. Oh, what a treat this film is. And thanks to all three of you. An amazing juxtaposition of two, of a life and a frame. So, my question is this there is no one hero's journey, is there? It keeps getting repeated. So, at 93, are you still on yet another hero's journey?
Actually, I'm going to be 94,
94.
on the 9th of March. That's why this is what is today, the 3rd of March. 6 दिन में. Well, I suppose life is always a journey, and one should always try and be a hero without being egoistic. You know, the problem with heroes is, as you all know, that they may be very effective, very powerful, but they're egoistic. That's what happened to Hitler, you remember, that's what happened to Mussolini. A lot of dictators that has happened. So, this is one thing I've been very, very cautious about, is never to try and let my ego swell. There's a great danger. My guru told me, actually, this is your danger, but to be careful. Because the moment you start growing in politics, your ego will grow also. So I can't say that I've totally subdued my ego, but I try. And you are carrying, what I'm trying to do actually through my lectures, through my books, is just to try and get across the teachings of the Upanishads, the basic teachings, get them across to the public. I anchored a series for Sunset TV called Ekam Sat. That is not for Bhadralokas like you, that is for the common folk. But it was watched by millions. And I presented different religions, Rashna. For example, merchant was there. I presented Muslim. Every religion in India, I introduced and presented speakers who spoke for themselves, who spoke for their religions. That's the sort of karma yoga that I'm doing.
I think it would be very good if you could give advice just now to the United States President about ego.
Well, it's extraordinary. You know, the public spat between two heads of state. I never believed that it could happen because we are brought up, you know, with diplomacy and all. So openly, मैं तू हो गई उनकी तो. Zelensky and Musk. You wanted to ask a question, but
yeah, my question was the last bit. Perhaps, you know, we have been taught from school days about Gandhiji's Mere Sapno Ka Bharat, the India of my dreams. And today we are all being inspired and asked to work towards the Viksit Bharat. So perhaps you might have a dream about the Viksit Bharat. But what is the India of your dreams? Gandhiji very clearly, I think for me, the essence of Upanishads is in Gandhiji's India of my dreams.
Partially.
He talks about that.
The India of my dream is, first of all, we've got to get rid of poverty. Until we get rid of poverty, there's still today millions of people who suffer, who shiver in the winter, who are drenched in the monsoon, who are parched in the summer. There are millions of children who don't get one full meal a day. How can we call ourselves a great country when you have that sort of poverty? So the first and immediate thing to do is to get rid of poverty. How you get rid of poverty is a big question. Whether by giving, the fact that we're giving 80 crores of people free rations is itself a very big thing, mind you. People might mock it. But for 80 crores, which is bigger than the population of many of the European countries put together, to give them, some people are saying, no, no, मुफ्त का दे रहे हैं, सब मुफ्त का दे रहे हैं, भूखे मर रहे हैं बेचारे, उनको दे रहे हैं तो बड़ा भारी पुण्य है. But we've got a long way to go. Two things must happen. We must get rid of poverty, and we must maintain cultural multiplicity. We must maintain cultural multiplicity. It's very important, because we do not want our society once again. We've had it once. I've seen it. None of you are old enough to have seen the except one or two people here, the pre-partition India. I saw it. I saw the way it grew. I saw Jinnah's direct action on the 4th of June 1945. In Calcutta, where people were killed on the streets of Calcutta. So I've seen this communalism growing and the disaster that it caused with partition. The disaster, millions of people were uprooted, lakhs of people lost their lives. So whenever we celebrate our independence, it's very good. It's very nice. I've been carrying the Jhanda for 18 years when I was head of state. Don't let us forget the people who suffered. We don't want that to happen. I'm not saying we'll have another partition, but I don't want that to happen again. So जो शकाफ बढ़ रहा है ना, again our society seems to be getting polarized. That is very dangerous.
I have one more thing to
Yes.
add. Already when we had that conference, and Marie-Louise von France said that Sita went back to Mother Earth. In the temple, again, there's no Sita. I think women have to have a place beside man
Exactly.
and rise again. Sita needs to rise. We all need also to have equality. And I think
Quite
that
right. योगी जी ने एक घोषणा की थी, योगी आदित्यनाथ जी ने, कि मैं एक 100 फुट की मूर्ति बना रहा हूँ श्री राम की. तो मैंने उनको पत्र लिखा, मैंने, योगी जी कृपा करके आप 50 फुट के राम की बनाइए, 50 सीता की बनाइए. आप फिर से सीता को वनवास दे रहे हैं. सीता के साथ जो व्यवहार हुआ अयोध्या में, आज तक यानी वो हमारे गले से नहीं उतर रही है बात.
और मुझे ये बताया गया कि गर्भगृह में तो अकेले राम है, क्योंकि वहाँ बर्थ प्लेस है. फर्स्ट फ्लोर पर राम और सीता इनका बन रहा है इसके ऊपर. दैट इज व्हाट दे टोल्ड मी. आई एम नॉट आर्गुइंग अबाउट दैट, बट दे सेड कि राम और सीता जो है वो ऊपर वाले उस पर बन रहा है. उसका वो अभी नीचे वाला बना है, उसके ऊपर वाले में ये पूरा राम दरबार बनेगा.
अब जब सीता का वनवास होगा तो फिर क्या होगा?
सर हम
वो भी पूछना था ना उनसे.
Okay, thank you all very much.
अच्छा जी, थैंक यू ऑल वेरी मच. थैंक यू रचना.
जन्मदिन की बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं सर.
Sir, I have a last question. Sir, I have a last question. So we are fortunate enough that we are sitting here and we can connect to you. But I would like you to give a message to the youngsters, other youngsters also. Like,
I do talk at universities and I talk on television, and I'll be very happy always to talk to people. I love talking.